Have you ever felt as if something inside you was frozen in time? As if a part of your soul got stuck there? In that specific moment, something happened, but you don't quite know what. And yet that something still haunts you silently, shaping your feelings, your choices, your silences. Carl Jung once said that what is not brought to consciousness returns as fate. And maybe that's exactly what's happening to you now. There is a part of you that never understood what happened, and that's why it's still stuck in the past. Not because it wants to be, but because it doesn't know how to leave. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get over experiences that were never truly understood, as if time alone were enough to heal what was suspended in the void of the unspoken. But there's something few people realise about this. The answer you're looking for is not where you think, and maybe, just maybe, you've never looked in the right place. Because the real trauma isn't what happened, it's what wasn't understood. And in this video, we're not going to search for ordinary explanations. We're going to dive in to what's hidden. We'll explore the traces left by unprocessed emotional experiences, the silent roots of emotional confusion, and why your inner child is still waiting for an explanation that never came. Get ready for a journey that doesn't offer ready-made answers, but rather questions that echo deeply. Because sometimes what heals isn't what we understand, but what we finally become able to feel. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. There are emotions that don't go away. They stay there, hidden between automatic gestures, behind forced smiles and uncomfortable silences. They are experiences that, although they happened a long time ago, still live inside us, as if they had just happened. They were never understood, welcomed, or expressed. They were simply swallowed, filed away in a dark corner of the mind. And that comes with a price. The mind tries to move on. The body pretends it forgot. But the heart never lies. It keeps everything. Every look that hurt, every word left unsaid, every absence no one ever explained. Unprocessed emotional experiences are like invisible cracks in an apparently intact wall. From the outside, no one notices. But on the inside, everything is about to collapse. Childhood is the ground where those seeds are planted. Small events that may seem insignificant to adult eyes, but to the pure perception of the inner child, they are emotional earthquakes. A scream, an abandonment, a punishment without explanation. Each of these moments leaves marks that time cannot erase. Because time doesn't heal what was never understood. And what's most curious is that many of these wounds don't even feel like ours. They appear in disguise, in a relationship that doesn't work, in a fear that makes no sense, in a pattern that repeats itself without explanation. But if we look closely, everything leads us back to those unprocessed experiences, to that breaking point where something was felt but never translated. It's in this emotional vacuum that trauma takes root, not as an event, but as an absence. The absence of meaning, of validation, of support. And when this absence lingers, it turns into emotional confusion. The mind tries to handle it, to rationalize. But the unconscious doesn't calm down with logic. It longs for presence, for being heard, for reconnection. Many times what we call current problems are just late manifestations of those undigested experiences. And that's why trying to fix them in the present, without visiting the past, is like drying ice. Nothing changes. It just repeats. The loop of pain continues until someone, you, decides to interrupt it. Healing, in this case, doesn't begin with an answer. It begins with a question. What within me still needs to be heard? Not in a hurry, not with judgment, but with the willingness to gently look at what still hurts. Because what was once felt intensely needs to be embraced with the same depth. What few people understand is that trauma isn't just in the memory, it's in how the body reacted and never returned to its natural state. It's in the inner child who froze in an attempt to protect themselves, and who to this day waits for someone to say, "I see you, I understand." And you're not alone anymore. This leads us to something even deeper. No tree, says Carl Jung, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. There are pains we don't know how to name. They live in the words we never learned to say, in the emotions no one taught us to recognize. This is the space of emotional confusion, a foggy territory where trauma hides, not as a scream, but as silence. A silence so dense it distorts the way we see ourselves and others. Trauma often doesn't arrive as a brutal event, but as a build-up of small disconnections, a missing glance, a hug withheld, an emotion ignored. And when this happens repeatedly, the body notices. But the mind can't make sense of it. It's like feeling something is wrong, but not being able to explain what. And so, you go quiet. But this silence is not peace, it's chaos. A chaos that bubbles inside, turning sensitivity into confusion. Because when a child feels fear, sadness, or anger, and no one helps them make sense of it, they learn to repress it. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Because alone, they don't know how to cope. And here lies the most delicate point. Unspoken trauma turns into body language, into unexplained symptoms, into disproportionate reactions. A touch that feels disturbing, a tone of voice that triggers panic, a simple delay that brings on despair. The adult mind doesn't understand, but the inner child is still stuck in that moment, trying to make sense of it all. Emotional confusion settles like a fog, and over time, it blends into identity. You start to believe you've always been this way. Too sensitive, too needy, too anxious. But in truth, you're just carrying questions that were never answered. Emotional codes no one helped you decipher, and the more you try to understand it rationally, the further the answer seems. Because the root of confusion isn't in logic. It's in the body, in implicit memories, in fragments of experience left scattered inside you. And that's exactly why healing doesn't begin with explanations, but with presence. Presence that listens, that holds, that doesn't demand immediate answers. Because before healing, there must be recognition. And before recognition, there must be feeling. Allowing the pain to surface without rushing to fix it, just with the courage to face it. As if looking into the eyes of a lost child and saying, "I'm here now." But there's one detail that changes everything. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. Carl Jung. Imagine a child standing in the middle of a dark hallway, trying to understand why they were left there alone. They look around, call out for someone, but no one answers. That moment isn't just a metaphor, it's real. And it plays out inside many of us every single day, because there is a part of our psyche that never grew up, a part that froze the moment the explanation never came. When something traumatic happens in childhood, the pain doesn't come only from what occurred, but from the fact that no one explained what it meant. The child feels, suffers, but doesn't understand. And when there's no explanation, the mind fills the void with fantasy. It's my fault. I'm not good enough. Something is wrong with me. And that's how the emotional wound becomes identity. This child, silent, forgotten, misunderstood, is still alive inside you. They show up in unexpected moments, in the rejection that hurts more than it should, in the criticism that paralyzes, in the love you can't receive, because to that child, the world is still confusing, still dangerous, and no one ever came back to say, "You got it wrong, it was never about you." The real pain isn't just in what happened, it's in what was never said, in the absence of context, in the lack of emotional support. And the longer this absence lingers, the deeper the wounds left by trauma become, because without an explanation, pain becomes a riddle. And living a life trying to solve that riddle is exhausting. Many adults are simply trying to survive with the emotional tools of a frightened child, trying to build relationships, cope with loss, endure frustration, all through the limited lens of someone who never received an emotional map for life. And that inner child, even without knowing it, is still waiting for someone to bring light into that dark hallway. The problem is that we grow up believing we need to leave childhood behind. That growing up means forgetting, but forgetting doesn't heal. It only hides, and everything we hide shows up in other forms. In dreams, in fears, in repetitive patterns, because the child who never received explanations becomes the adult who can't explain themselves. Perhaps the greatest act of healing isn't to understand everything precisely, but simply to sit beside that inner child and listen, without hurry, without judgment, because sometimes the only explanation they need to hear is you weren't wrong for feeling what you felt, and now I see you. And this leads us to something even deeper. Learn all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. Carl Jung. We live in an era that worships answers. We want to understand, decode, solve, as if pain were a puzzle that disappears once it's cracked. But what if what truly heals us isn't explanation, but acceptance? What if true liberation begins the moment we stop trying to understand everything and simply feel? Because emotional pain, especially the kind rooted in childhood trauma, doesn't always translate into words. It's primitive. It exists before language, before logic. It's a pain the body carries, even when the mind has already forgotten the facts. And insisting on rational explanations for something that was born from emotion is like trying to dry the ocean with a sieve. The inner child living in us doesn't need theories. They need warmth, presence, a look that says, you're allowed to feel, permission to cry without explanation, to be confused without shame, to hurt without a deadline. Because true emotional holding doesn't demand conditions, it simply stays. And often that's all pain ever needed to begin to dissolve. There is a silent healing that begins when we stop fighting what we feel. When we stop trying to prove to ourselves that we should already be fine. That should is the emotional chain keeping the trauma alive. Because every time we deny what we feel, we abandon the part of us that most needed to be heard. And if you allow yourself, just for a moment, you may realize you don't need all the answers right now. Maybe you don't need to reconstruct the entire timeline or understand every detail of what hurt you. What your inner child wants is simply for you to stay with them, not to explain, but to remain. Curiously, when we embrace pain without demanding explanations, something begins to shift. The pain that once felt like a terrifying monster starts to take on a more human shape. It stops being something to conquer and becomes something you carry with dignity, as a sign that you survived, and even more, that now you're ready to live more truthfully. In the end, understanding is a bonus, feeling is essential, because the body knows the path to healing, the soul knows the rhythm of release, And the heart. The heart just needs space to be what it is. A fertile ground where wounds once embraced can become wisdom. But freeing yourself from that pain involves something even more delicate. What we resist persists. What we accept transforms us. Carl Jung. There is a kind of weight you can't see. It doesn't show up on tests, can't be measured on scales, and yet it's immense. It's the weight of what was never said. Words stuck in your throat, emotions swallowed, silent screams echoing inside for years, and no one heard them. Maybe you grew up learning it was better to stay quiet, that certain pains weren't that serious, that talking about them was dramatic, or worse, disrespectful, and so, little by little you silenced yourself, until silence became a prison, not made of walls but of guilt, shame and emotional confusion. And the cruelest part is that the longer the unspoken remains within us, the more it consumes us. It steals our spontaneity, distorts relationships, sabotages opportunities, because what wasn't expressed continues to express itself in other ways, in emotional outbursts, in psychosomatic illnesses, in insomnia, in self-judgment. Trauma, when repressed, doesn't disappear. It disguises itself. Freeing yourself from this weight doesn't mean saying everything to everyone. It's not about confrontation. It's about giving yourself a voice. It starts within. When you write down what you never had the courage to say, when you allow yourself to feel the anger, the sadness, the fear, without censoring yourself, when you look at your inner child and say, "You were right to feel that way." This is an act of silent revolution, a healing that requires no audience, yet transforms everything. Because the relief of finally hearing yourself, of validating what was once denied, is indescribable. It's like opening a window in a room that has been locked for decades. Air flows in, light pours through, and the soul breathes. And the most beautiful part of all this is that by releasing what was trapped, you not only heal, you become a safe space for others as well, a channel of compassion, someone who knows how to listen beyond words, who recognizes another's pain because they've made peace with their own. In the end, everything that was left unsaid is still waiting to be heard, not by someone else, but by you, because no one can give you back your voice except you. And then everything makes sense. All our lives we try to fix what we feel as if it were a flaw. We search for therapy, books, quick answers, but deep down, there's always been this feeling, something is wrong with me. But maybe nothing was ever wrong with you. Maybe what was missing wasn't strength, but explanation. Maybe what you carry as fragility is actually the emotional intelligence of your inner child trying to protect herself the only way she knew how. Because the truth that few dare to face is this: what holds you in the past isn't what happened. It's what wasn't understood. It's what wasn't said. It's what wasn't fully felt. And then everything makes sense. Emotional confusion, trauma, blockages, all of them were born in the exact moment something inside you went silent. Not out of weakness, but out of survival. And that's why healing doesn't come when you defeat the past. It comes when you return and meet that part of yourself that's still there, waiting to be heard. In the end, the child who didn't understand what happened didn't need a diagnosis. She needed love. She needed care. She needed someone to say, "I believe in what you felt, and you are not alone." But are we ready to accept this? Because accepting this means letting go of the guilt narrative. It means giving up the internal battle to be someone normal. It means looking at yourself with such deep compassion that no pain can survive there for long. And in that moment, when you stop running and simply allow yourself to be, It's as if time dissolves. The past no longer holds you. The present expands. And the future, at last, opens. Maybe this answer was inside you all along. If this video touched something in you, then maybe, finally, you found the key you were looking for. The one that doesn't open external doors, but unlocks the invisible cell where a part of you has been trapped for so long. The part that didn't understand. The part that never had a voice. The part that just needed to be heard. Now you know, there is nothing wrong with you. There never was. There was only silence. There was absence. There was a deep emotional confusion, born from old traumas, lived by an inner child who just wanted to feel safe. And today, maybe for the first time, and that child was seen. That's where everything begins to change. Because when you allow yourself to welcome without needing to understand, to feel without judgment, to heal without rushing, the past stops being a prison and becomes a bridge that brings you back to yourself. True freedom is not about forgetting what happened, but about giving new meaning to what was never spoken. And now, with everything we explored here, you have the chance to do that. To rewrite your story from a place of listening, affection, and presence. Now is the time to take the first step. Start applying these insights today, and then tell me in the comments, which part of this reflection resonated with you the most? Or maybe, what was the sentence that made you think, this is what I needed to hear? Your experience might illuminate the path for someone still searching for answers. And if you want to go even deeper in this healing process and reconnect with your inner child, watch the video recommended right above. It may expand everything you felt here even further. See you in the next video.